Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw this week, Paul George, of all people, got suspended for 25 games for the use of improper medication. That's what they're calling it.
Paul George just snagged a 25-game ban, nearly 12 million lost. The league claims he breached their anti-drug code. George insists it involved mental health meds. Then vintage clips emerged. The web completely lost its mind, and we finally dug to the root of this mess. Prescription P, the 25-game ban shaking the association. On January 31st, 2026, the league dropped a nuke that sent tremors through the hoops landscape and exploded across every sector of social platforms within a few hours. Philadelphia 76ers wing Paul George was officially banned for 25 games without pay for breaching the anti-drug code. The fiscal fallout was simply staggering. About $11.9 million in wages vanished instantly due to what George personally framed as improper medication. This 9-time All-Star, a guy who forged a 15-year run on elite two-way skills, clutch, showings, and the sort of defensive grit that garnered him 4 all-defensive team nods, was suddenly facing down a hiatus that would devour most of what remained of the 26th season, leaving the Sixers' already shaky postseason dreams hanging by a wire. For a squad that had sunk $212 million into George's talent just 18 months prior, the report hit like a sledgehammer on a house of glass. The update came via ESPN's Shams Charania, who stated that George blamed the breach on medication he had used while seeking help for a private mental health matter. George issued a release owning full accountability, apologizing to the franchise, his squad, and the base, and stressing that he planned to utilize the suspension span to get his head and frame into the best attainable shape for his comeback. The league, as is standard procedure, did not name the specific substance involved. Yet league sources confirmed that the infraction was not tied to performance-enhancing drugs. That detail, however, did absolutely zero to slow down the web's ravenous hunger for theories, mockery, and the type of rapid-fire story building that turns complex human struggles into snackable content before the initial press briefing has even wrapped. Within hours of the news breaking, the nicknames started pouring in. Prescription P, Drug P, and Pill George began trending across X and TikTok. Despite the clear statement that performance-boosting substances were not involved, the memes were brutal, the gags were cruel, and the court of public opinion had already delivered its ruling long before the truth could fully circulate. Fans raced to write the most biting one-liner. Parody. Profiles swapped their display images. Fantasy basketball owners rushed to tweak their lineups. And through it all, the real query, the one that every NBA head, analyst, and conspiracy theorist wanted solved, remained strictly unresolved. What exactly did Paul George take? The NBA-NBPA anti-drug program keeps a detailed list of banned substances that reaches far beyond what most casual fans would assume. The rules ban all benzodiazepines, including alprazolam, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, and Librium, which are commonly prescribed for anxiety issues and listed under drugs of abuse. Stimulants like Adderall, one of the most heavily prescribed meds for ADHD in the United States, are also barred unless a player has secured a Therapeutic Use Exemption, a rigid process that demands clearance through the league's medical system rather than merely having a private doctor write a prescription. Beyond those classifications, the banned list covers harder substances like ketamine, LSD, cocaine, and various synthetic cathinones, rounding out a code that casts an exceptionally wide net over both recreational and therapeutic medications. As one analyst pointed out, the true snag might not have been what George took, but how he got it and why he hid it from the team's medical staff.
It says Paul George's 25-game suspension highlighted that taking medication for a mental health issue that is not approved or is misused, even if prescribed by a personal doctor rather than a team doctor, can lead to significant penalties. So I'm wondering if maybe it was something that he didn't want the team to find out about. And if in fact it is mental health related, I mean, I don't know if that's everyone's business. I mean, maybe it is, I guess, because you're part of the team. They invest a lot of money in you. Maybe it's in their best interest to know.
That comment strikes at the core of a complex crossroads between pro sports, private lives, and mental health shame that the league has only lately started to openly address. Sources verified that George's ban grew from medication ordered by a private doctor rather than a team-sanctioned physician. A key detail under the NBA's anti-drug rules, whether George purposely hid the pills from squad medical staff because he feared the shame tied to mental health meds, or whether he simply failed to navigate the red tape maze of the Therapeutic Use Exemption process, stays unknown. But the outcome was the same: 25 games, almost $12 million in lost wages, and a public judgment, thrusting his private medical history directly under the harshest, most relentless glare that our current sports media ecosystem can generate, cycle could ever manufacture. That specific timing of the ban provoked serious skepticism throughout the entire league. Hoops landscape. Wild theories spread fast, claiming George might have sparked a random screening request following that big 32-point game versus the Milwaukee Bucks on January 27, 2026, just 4 days prior to the ban announcement. This reasoning, though purely speculative, carried some legitimate surface-level credibility. George had been putting up 16 points each game this whole season, and a sudden spike to 32 points versus a strong, tough opponent was the specific sort of statistical anomaly that could grab the focus of the league's testing unit. Others highlighted something even more obvious, something that had already trended huge days prior to the ban, was even made official and that fans retrospectively saw as the instant that sealed George's doom.
When I first saw this story break, a couple days before, I had reposted this video. Paul George was in a layup line doing 360 dunks with ease. Now listen, at his age, with the amount of injuries he's had, seeing that, I knew he was going to get tested. I said it as soon as I saw the fucking video. He should never have done that shit in the layup line. Go watch his video.
That visual of a 35-year-old Paul George, a guy whose path was shaped largely by some truly devastating trauma, specifically that nasty leg break that almost finished his run during that 2014 USA run in Las Vegas, smashing 360 slams during warm-ups next to Tyrese Maxey with the pure smoothness of a guy in his physical peak, was, simply put, shocking. This was a guy who survived multiple intense operations, fought shoulder pain during his Clippers run, starting the 2025-26 campaign at an age when most league forwards are either warming the pine or retired from the game completely. That warm-up tape clip was the sort of physical show that virtually screamed for investigation. And investigation is precisely what it soon got, bringing results that would cost George millions plus a huge portion of his year. That viral video, the endless memes, and the shadow of meds saved me. If the ban itself was the quake, what followed next on the web really was the flood that crushed the shore. A video from late February 2025 reappeared with brutal timing. Tape of Paul George kidding with partner Joel Embiid about managing their pain, in which George simply casually says, "Meds save me." That video, initially a bit of playful locker room chat between two squad members, bonding over the heavy body cost of a tough league schedule, was totally innocent in its first form. Setting. A pro, making a humble joke regarding the mix of painkillers, cortisone jabs, and healing therapies that any older pro athlete depends on to play. But when that exact video returned in the direct wake of a 25-game ban, it turned into exactly what the web does best: a tool of total shame, perfectly timed and ruthlessly used for max harm. The footage moved like wildfire across X, TikTok, Insta, and YouTube, hitting millions of raw looks within 48 hours. Reply threads blew up with versions of that same gag, all trying to beat the other in wit and meanness. Users screen capped the specific shot where George spoke those three notorious words and made it into a joke format that ruled Hoop's social channels for the major chunk of a full week. That clip was posted, reposted, stitched, duetted, quote, tweeted, and responded to by every sports talk profile with a heartbeat and an internet link. Online creators who had never voiced one thought regarding Paul George's entire playing career now acted like pros on his private medical options. It was, by all distinct standards, a viral hit, but it was also deeply, almost purposely deceptive. What none seemed keen on noting was the real truth. George was not owning up to illegal substance use. He wasn't confirming any rule breach. He was not giving a guide to his private medicine shelf. He was telling the sort of gag that any typical 34-year-old, pro player with shot knees, a medically fixed leg, and a decade and a half of league wear on his frame would crack. A gag about the fact that competing at the top tier of pro hoops at his age demands a massive and fully lawful routine of healing meds. The substances he was mentioning were the squad. Managed, league-okayed, doctor-watched treatments that every old guy in the association takes, but Nuance does. Not bring views. Context does not pop on social apps. And that system has never once pushed a post that read, "Really? This is more complex than it looks." This is where the name of this clip, Fresh. Tape of Paul George using meds with other league guys goes huge. Requires the most vital correction of this. Whole text. And it is a fix that cannot be said with enough force. No trusted news group, no reporter or trusted outlet has released, proven, or cited any fresh tape depicting Paul George actually taking narcotics, illicit or prescribed, alongside fellow NBA athletes. That is a myth. Thorough sweeps through ESPN, AP, News, CBS Sports, The Guardian, Yahoo Sports, Daily Mail, The Athletic X, TikTok, and every possible sector of the web returned precisely zero proof regarding such clips, pictures, or eyewitness reports. What does remain is that recovered drugs help me video. Vintage tape devoid of its true nuance, reformatted using deceptive headlines and boosted by some code that was built from the bottom up to favor anger, awe, and visceral reaction over precision, justice, or facts. The engine of digital falsehoods functioned precisely as intended, with every element flowing smoothly into the rest. The actual band supplied the necessary weight, an indisputable league, verified truth that gave a sense of validity to anything that ensued. The recovered tape supplied the optic proof, however deceptive. The crowd-created monikers supplied the marketing, turning a nuanced punishment issue into a consumable, viral joke, and the lack of formal insights regarding the exact substance created the void that guesswork, gossip, and pure invention hurried in to occupy. In days, passive Hoops viewers who had viewed the captions and the tapes had digested a story that held merely a fleeting likeness to the recorded truth. One where Paul George was seemingly getting wasted alongside his peers on film, a situation for which there is exactly zero proof from any outlet of any type. Charles Barkley added fuel to the already burning flame when he featured on Inside the NBA and dubbed George's mental health prescription excuse odd, publicly doubting the account in front of a nationwide broadcast viewership. Barkley's doubt, expressed with his signature raw honesty, held massive gravity in the basketball world. He is one of the most iconic, citable, and reliable figures in all of sports press, and his readiness to openly question the formal report granted tacit license to millions of watchers to do the like. It was the type of remark that lingers for weeks, getting snagged, shared, and argued in every text thread and reply block on the Hoops web. Other press figures jumped on with shifting levels of nuance. Michael Irvin made gags, pulling parallels to his own widely known private past with illicit drug use. The talk had totally separated from the proven truths and was running purely on mood, guess, humor, and show business.
Now, I also saw in a lot of the comments, people were saying, oh, it's probably just weed. Weed isn't banned anymore in the NBA. So it's not that. But after seeing him do all them dunks and shit in the layup line, I was thinking maybe him and LeBron got the same doctor. I'm kidding. Kind of.
The LeBron analogy, presented as a gag, but mixed with real doubt that connected with a shockingly wide crowd, tapped into one of pro sports' most constant, quiet discussions. The notion that top pros who keep playing at godlike tiers well into their 30s and past must be trying things other than food, rest tuning, and oxygen tanks has trailed athletes like LeBron James, Tom Brady, and Cristiano Ronaldo for ages. It is the type of hunch that can never be verified or denied, which is exactly what makes it so lasting. George's ban handed those rumors a solid fact check, a true, proven rule breach by a seasoned pro who had lately shown stunning power, even though the breach had zero to do with skill boosting by any formal report. The money aspect added just another level of mass intrigue to a tale that already had more angles than anyone could fairly handle in a sole news spin. George inked a 4-year, $212 million pact with Philadelphia in July 2024, a sign that made him one of the top earning pros in the game and stood for the peak of a signing season that had remolded Philadelphia's title shot. Now, in his second year donning a Sixers jersey, he was losing nearly $12 million of that pay because of pills that, by his own open record, he was using to treat a mental health state.
Yeah, I mean, it does suck because 25 games, I read that he's like essentially giving up $11 million. Like, just think about that. You took some medication for, I guess, your mood, right? Just to feel better, I imagine, and it cost you $11 million.
That massive money fine, the equal of what most folks will not see in 5 lifetimes of labor, highlights both the harshness of the league's drug code and the total rigidity of its execution system. The NBA runs on a firm liability standard when it relates to drug screens, stating that motive, medical grounds, valid scripts, and life factors are largely beside the point. Once a barred drug shows in a pro's body without the right waiver forms sent and cleared via the league's set paths. George is not the first athlete to grasp this truth at devastating fiscal and career damage. And his ban fits squarely inside a rising trend of 25-game prohibitions, which exposes exactly how many pro hoopers have hit a wall on this rule for causes that span from calculated fraud to simple bureaucratic carelessness, the rhythm of punishments, PG's path home, plus what follows now, Paul. George's 25-game banishment is hardly a solitary event in the league's constant policing of their anti-drug system. It is the newest chapter in a vast educational and on occasion truly pitiful role of athletes who have suffered the very same sentence within hauntingly parallel situations. In February 2025, Milwaukee Bucks forward Bobby Portis was sidelined 25 bouts after popping positive on tramadol, an opioid analgesic barred by both the league's code plus the World Anti-Doping Agency's forbidden sheet. Portis plus his rep Mark Bartelstein portrayed the infraction as a simple error, claiming that Portis had swallowed tramadol, thinking it was Toradol, a lawfully sanctioned injectable pain remedy frequently given to ballers on match nights to soothe the chronic elbow trauma he had been nursing since the prior autumn. The tablet supposedly came from a private assistance medicine container. No desire to defraud was claimed by anybody present, yet the rules mandate rigid accountability irrespective of background, motive, or how touching the justification could be. In January 2024, Cleveland Cavaliers big Tristan Thompson garnered an equivalent 25-game prohibition after checking positive for ibutamoren, a growth hormone booster, plus SARM-LGD4033, a specific androgen receptor tuner, both clearly categorized as performance-boosting compounds. Unlike Portis plus George, Thompson's infraction concerned chemicals with distinct and indisputable performance-boosting capabilities. So, no medication blunder or unintentional consumption, reasoning was given openly. Thompson owned total accountability plus served the punishment, lacking lodging an objection, later noting that the days moved fast, plus that he directed his power toward training for a solid comeback. In November 2019, Atlanta Hawks wing John Collins was benched 25 matches for flagging positive on growth hormone-releasing peptide 2, just another PED which triggers growth hormone creation. Collins atoned to his squad, the franchise, plus the crowds, then stated he would contest the ruling, although the final result of that dispute was never formally verified. That exact October, Phoenix Suns giant DeAndre Ayton, the #1 global choice in the 2018 draft, caught the same 25-game fine for showing dirty for a diuretic, a class of compound frequently linked with cloaking agents utilized to hide the footprint of other illicit chemicals in a player's blood. The trend through these files shows a crucial and rather awkward truth regarding the association's anti-dope regime. The 25-game hiatus is the default first strike sanction, and it lands with flat and unyielding weight. Whether the compound in doubt is an inadvertently swallowed analgesic, a consciously injected PED, or a mental wellness prescription acquired, minus correct league permission. The code draws no significant line between carelessness and malice at the first violation tier, a structural move that favors prevention and sporting honor above individual justice. Ballers like Wilson Chandler, who was outlawed 25 nights in August 2019 for flagging positive on Ipamorelin, a growth hormone trigger peptide which he claimed was directed during trauma recovery before he inked with the Brooklyn Nets and who dropped roughly $650,000 in checks. Hence, learn the same. Brutal tutorial. The league's screening machine does not ask why the compound is inside your system. It asks only if it is. More drastic ramifications stand for recurring violators and flagrant breaches, acting as a signal that 25 games is in the sport's structure, the lenient side of the scale. Toronto Raptors guard Jalen Harris was ejected and barred from the association permanently in July 2021 for breaching the anti-drug code, a lifetime exile, which could only be overturned via a stiff reinstatement protocol involving the league's audit panel. Vintage files from the 80s through the early 2000s featured multi-year and forever bans for habitual, blow-related infractions. Most famously, Michael Ray Richardson's lifetime ban in 1986 and Roy Tarpley's numerous suspensions which effectively killed his run. The modern NBA has largely embraced a more restorative and empathetic stance for rookie violators. Yet the fiscal and sporting punishments at even the initial strike tier stay harsh enough to radically shift a baller's campaign, standing, and cash reserve. For George, particularly, the trek back holds a firm schedule and massive consequences for both his personal arc and Philadelphia's title dreams stalled. The ban started right at that Sixers contest facing the New Orleans Pelicans on January 31st, 2026. And George can return March 25th, 2026 when Philly hosts the Chicago Bulls. By then, the Sixers will possess merely 10 regular season bouts left, a super tight margin meant for George to ditch the rust from a roughly 2-month break, mesh with guys who will have gone 25 bouts, building fresh squad chemistry lacking him, and help shove Philadelphia toward a postseason spot that this club has been fighting to hold in his stead. No pleas or cuts have been noted by February 7th, 2026, and George is slated to sit every single match of that full 25-game ban. The franchise reaction from Philadelphia was calm, tactical, and clearly supportive in a style that implies the office sees this as a bump rather than a break. Sixers GM Daryl Morey openly backed George, showing frustration, yet total belief in his comeback, claiming that George stays part of that elite core beside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Head coach Nick Nurse stated that George is allowed inside the club's training center during this suspension span, implying that he will stay physically and mentally locked with the squad's preparation, even while unable to dress up for matches. The early results minus George have been grimly optimistic. Philadelphia went 3-1 in the first 4 bouts of the ban, banking on more input from Kelly Oubre Jr. and the steady growth of Maxey as a main scoring and playmaking threat. From a monetary angle, this suspension formed an unexpected and fairly cynical silver lining for the organization's back office. George's lost pay yielded $5.8 million in tax credits, equaling half of his gone wages, which helped Philadelphia move closer to the tax apron and might have swayed the club's rather quiet and safe stance at the February 5th trade deadline. The basketball price, however, is way more tough to measure and far more critical for the squad's postseason life. George had been averaging 16 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists a night in 27 games this year, and was widely seen as the club's best and most flexible perimeter guard, the sort of athlete whose grip on winning goes far past what the box score shows. Experts think the Sixers still hold roughly 74% playoff odds, even without George, with a likely play-in tournament route if the club cannot climb the ladder during his ban. The wider view, however, goes far past box scores, postseason math, and luxury tax math. George's case has sparked a talk that the NBA and its players have been wrestling with for years. The crossroads of mental health care, professional sports, and a drug testing, a framework that was built mainly to snag cheaters and recreational users, but increasingly traps players seeking valid medical care for issues that carry heavy personal stigma. The league's own anti-drug code runs under strict liability, a system that serves the league's corporate interest in keeping competitive fairness, but creates real and growing friction when applied to guys navigating the deeply personal, often scary, and still largely stigmatized process of seeking mental health help. George's, the choice to openly link his ban to mental health care was itself a rare and bold act of openness for a top-tier pro athlete. And the fact that this openness was met with widespread jokes, memes, and mockery rather than empathy, grace, or support says something deeply ugly about where the public talk on mental health in professional sports actually stands, as opposed to where we'd like to tell ourselves it is. As for the alleged new clips that the web claimed existed, the damning video of Paul George using drugs alongside other NBA guys that supposedly went viral and allegedly served as proof of some bigger scandal. It was never real. It was a ghost born from the crash of a real suspension news, a resurfaced joke clip taken wildly out of context, an army of cynical meme creators, and a digital world that dropped the line between what actually happened and what yields maximum clicks long before Paul George's name ever entered the conversation. The actual story, a veteran pro who sought aid for a mental health issue through wrong channels, who failed to navigate the league's bureaucratic waiver process, and who paid a massive personal and financial toll for that failure, is compelling, human, and complex enough on its own merits. But it demands patience, nuance, empathy, and the patience to engage with nuance. Yet these remain values which our digital landscape sells off at a disastrously cheap price. Paul George comes back on March 25th, 2026. He gets precisely 10 starts to show if he might truly be that talent Philadelphia spent $212 million on. A 9-time All-Star, that 2019 MVP finalist who netted 28 buckets plus topped the charts in thefts. That two-way beast who grabbed 4 all-defensive squad distinctions plus the big-time closer, who has hauled organizations from Indiana through Oklahoma City, then Los Angeles onto Philadelphia during a journey that has now lasted a decade plus a half. Yet the web shall have already shifted towards that new viral scandal, that fresh, deceptive banner, that fresh clip of misunderstood video which validates whichever story seems most gratifying at the time. Such is the loop. So Paul George, medicinal P, narcotic PG-13, a guy who formerly hammered 360 slams during warm-ups, just as if his frame were not kept intact via medical screws plus pure strength of mind, is merely the newest athlete to become trapped inside its teeth. Thanks for viewing. Click those other links on the display.